All right, well, welcome back to the 126 Collective. And if you're here with me live, thank you for making it back. I had a little bit of a snafu on Zoom, but hopefully I've got that taken care of moving forward. It will be the right time, which is 11 a.m. Eastern time. And if you're watching this on replay, I appreciate you being here. You'll be able to catch the recording of all of our sessions in in My Mighty Network. So you definitely want to make sure that you go there if you miss one or you want to just watch something again. That is also an option, and hopefully you can share this with people who might need to see it. So I want to dive in today talking about the parable of the talents. So it came up last time, and I know that I said we were going to build a course based on leadership principles in the Bible and that we were going to focus on famous leaders in the Bible, and we are certainly going to do that. And we started last week, though, in the book of Genesis, where God creates humans to have dominion. Like we were created to lead, we were born to lead, and He placed us in the garden to tend it and keep it. And we talked about that. And so I thought it was appropriate before we dive into individual leaders in the Bible, the good ones and the not so good ones, and the terrible ones. We're going to talk about some of those too, that we would look at the parable of the talents. So we're jumping from Old Testament to New Testament today. And so the Old Testament is written mostly in Hebrew and Aramaic. So last week I shared with you guys some words that jump out of those verses that were in Hebrew. But the New Testament is written in Greek. And so there's a couple of words I want to share with you today. And so just so you'll know a little bit about my methodology, when I select a passage or a chapter or even a book to study in the Bible, I want to read it in multiple translations because what I'm looking for is not the translations where they chose the same word over and over again, but where they chose a different word to translate. Those are the ones that stand out to me, and those are the ones I want to dig in a little bit. I typically use the ESV, so when I put it in your handout, it's always going to be the ESV, which stands for the English Standard Version. It's considered more of a formal equivalent, which means it's trying to translate word for word, which is almost impossible. There's some nuance in Greek and Aramaic and Hebrew that we just can't translate into today. It was thousands of years ago. Um, some of them are more thought for thought translations, and then some are translations considered dynamic equivalents, like a little bit of both. But I use the ESV in general. But when I'm doing my research, I'm going to look across various translations and look for those differences. So the parable of the talents was a story that was told by Jesus to his followers. And it's what we call eschatological teaching. That's just a fancy word that means end of times, end of times. And so Jesus is about to leave his disciples for an undisclosed period of time. Spoiler alert, you probably know it already. He does get crucified, he's killed. He does come back briefly. He's resurrected, but then he's going to leave again for an undisclosed period of time. That's the time that we're in right now for those of us who are followers of Jesus. So in the story, Jesus, you can think of Jesus when you read Master or Lord, and he's leaving and he's delegating responsibility to the people he's left behind. So that's what this story is kind of about. Now, he expects his followers to know enough about him to be able to follow what he's taught them in his absence, so that they'll be ready for when he ultimately returns. Okay. So this parable, this story is about this expectation that there is upon us to responsibly use and grow what has been given to us, right? Whether you're a believer or not, it's about your potential. John Maxwell says that God's gift to us is our potential. Our gift to God is realizing that potential. So we're going to learn in this story, in this parable, how faithfulness is the standard and how action leads to obedient action leads to further opportunities, success, and growth, but fear-driven inaction leads to loss. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. So I want you to join me, and I'll go ahead and put it on the screen so that you can see it. I want you to join me in Matthew. So that's one of the four gospels in the New Testament. It's the first one, Matthew, and it's chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. So I'm going to go ahead and read. For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But the one who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I've made 5 talents more. His master said, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So there's so much to break down in here. I have no idea. This is on grace only today that I'm going to manage to get through this. But I want to bring your attention to a few things. First of all, what I want you to understand is that parables, what we call, it's basically a teaching story. And a parable often includes shocking elements. Shocking elements. Some of you may have heard, especially if you've worked with me, you've heard of a pattern interrupt. Like there's something that just inserts itself into the normal pattern of things that it catches you off guard. And that's what parables often had. They had shocking elements. Now, at just first read, you might not even understand what those elements are, but I'm going to educate you a little bit today on what those are. So what often happened in a parable is it shook people out of their normal way of thinking about things. Remember, this audience 2,000 years ago would have heard some things in that story that you and I won't hear today. So that's an indication that you were meant to stop and pay attention because you're like, what did he just say? And that then it opens up to you this idea that the parables are about even bigger realities. So I want to go back and look at this, just a few pieces of this. Number one, we've already said that in this story, Jesus is the man who's going away for an undisclosed period of time. And his servants, guys, and depending on your translation, it may say slave or it may say servant. We got to completely divorce ourselves from what we know as Americans in the 21st century of what slavery meant. It was completely different. We don't have time to go into it, but think of these as bond servants. They have willingly, essentially, sold their services to the master to do work for a particular period of time, usually as a way to get out of debt. Okay, so we won't even go there today. Just trust me. This is not slaves as you and I might think of them. So first of all, what's shocking is this master is going away and he entrusts to his servants his wealth. Think about that. That's bonkers. So let's talk about what talents are. Talent is a Greek word, comes from the word talenton, which originally meant a way to measure things, like a scale, if you will. Over time, talenton began to be used for a particular weight, which was about 75 pounds as you and I would measure it. And so ultimately, a talent became about 75 pounds of gold, which was equivalent, listen carefully, to about 20 years of wages for the common laborer. So you've got a master who's leaving for an undisclosed period of time, and he's giving his servants five, two, and one talent. So if one talent is 20 years of wages, how much is five talents? It's 100 years of wages. 100 years. So the guy who gets two talents, that's 40 years of his wages. And even the last guy who got one talent, that's 20 years worth of his wages. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So let's see how that shows up later. But it says he gave five, two, and one, each according to his ability. So something to note here is that everything belonged to the master. So for those people who read scripture as followers of God, that means everything belongs to God. It's kind of like we talked about last week. God created all of it. He gave us certain responsibilities and commandments. So all belongs to him. All of your success, your wealth, your intelligence, everything that you have ultimately belongs to God. It's not yours, but it's been entrusted to you, right? So it was only much later, even in the first century, that the word talent went from being 20 years worth of wages, this weight of about 75 pounds of gold, to, based on the way the early church fathers taught it, to be understood as a skill, a gift, a talent, right? As you and I know that now. That meaning came later. So let's look at the next shocking thing. He who had received the five talents went at once. Some translations say immediately. Like it was immediate, at once. He didn't wait. Now he doesn't know how long the guy's going to be gone. He just knows that immediately he needs to get to work. The word here for traded is the Greek word ergasato, and it means to work, labor, do business, or trade. So it's highly indicated based on the way the word is used and translated that this first guy went and started a business. He didn't really just like trade. He didn't just invest. He actually would have likely started a business. So immediately, the guy went and traded. Now remember, it said that the talents were divided according to ability. So it doesn't say that the guy who got 10 is better than the guy who got five or one, or they're worse than him. There's no indication that there's a comparison as to whether or not those talents were divided based on some sort of hierarchy, just according to their ability. Do we all have different talents, skills, and gifts? Absolutely. They're given to us precisely, right? Precisely. They're delivered with precision, okay? But whatever the talent was, the first guy goes and begins a business. He begins to trade. He puts that talent to work. And he doubled his talents. And so the guy who got two talents did the same thing. But what about the last guy? He hid it. He just stuffed it in the ground. So let's move on. The master eventually comes back. The first guy steps up and says, look, I took your five talents and I've made five talents more. Listen what the master says. So important. Well done, good and faithful servant. Not productive servant, not perfect servant, not better servant, none of those things. Well done, good and faithful. You have been faithful over a little. Please write above that the word little, a question mark and an exclamation point. What? A little? He gave him 100 years of wages. That's not a little. Take what you make, multiply it times 100. It's not a little, at least I hope. Unless you're currently making zero, we probably should have a different conversation. But it's not a little. That would have been shocking because the audience here would have understood that 10 talents, that five talents would have been equivalent to 100 years of wages. Okay, so it wasn't a little. But listen to what else the master says. Enter into the joy of your master. Joy could also be translated as happiness. So why would the master, it was all his anyway. He entrusts a lot of it to a servant, and then the servant multiplies that, and then the servant is invited into the joy and happiness of the master. That says a lot. That says a lot that the master would actually want to share his own joy and happiness. If he was, wouldn't you think a master would take the money and say, thanks for making me some money, now get out? But he didn't. He said, welcome into the joy of your master. So same thing happens with the guy with 2 talents, right? He multiplies that to 4. He gets the same quote, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little, 40 years worth of wages. I'll make you, I will give you, set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. So let's go to the third guy who says, look, I knew you were a hard guy. You reap where you don't sow and you gather where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, you can have it back. What's interesting is that the master says to him, you're wicked and slothful. Like you did not use the talent I gave you. You just stuffed it in the ground, right? But here's what's interesting, that the Jesus says as he's telling the story, you knew that I reap where I haven't sown and gather where I scattered no seed? Notice the question mark, very important, circle that. Because he's not conceding his point. He's saying, if that's what you believe, if you believe that I'm a hard slave driver and that I take what isn't mine, then why would you think it was a good idea to bury that talent in the ground? You could have at least invested it with the bankers and gotten me some interest. But if you truly believe that, then you are wicked and you are slothful. So it's important to understand that he's not conceding the point. He's not saying, no, the master is wicked and hard. He's saying, if that's what you believed, you really made a bad choice. So that third servant has this punitive view of his master, right? So that doesn't even make any sense. Even that guy, the master gave him 20 years worth of his wages. So that doesn't make sense. Why would he say that the master was stingy or, hard or took what wasn't his? That doesn't even match the generosity. It tells you that that third servant, he's not even thinking about this correctly. So there's a lot of shocking elements in this parable. And I think it's important for us to think. So let's move forward and take this into where we are today. That our goal is to be prepared to utilize the talents we've been given without comparison. What good would it do me to compare whether my talent matches yours or anybody else's? I've been entrusted with the talent that I have according to my ability. And my job is to go out and invest that talent wisely, to utilize it if we're talking about the marketplace, because this story is often used now to be teaching you about what you're supposed to do with your intelligence, with your talents, with your skills, and what you're supposed to do with it in the marketplace. It's kind of like we talked about last week with tending and keeping the garden. That's our job. We've been planted in a garden, and our job is to tend it and keep it. We've all been given different talents, skills, and abilities, and our job is simply to be faithful with those talents. So not to compare them to anybody else, but to go out and use them. If we believe that everything belongs to God and has been entrusted to us, then we have to believe that those gifts have been very intentional and they're matched to our capacity. So in the telling of the story for you and I today, it's not about comparison. It's not about perfection. It's about faithfulness. And anytime we don't take action based on fear, some of us remember the old Rush song, when you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. But when we act out of fear or making excuses, but we don't utilize our talents, but we just hide them away for whatever reason, we can understand we're going to get a very different result than someone who faithfully takes their talents and uses them for the betterment of ourselves, of the world, and for those of us who are followers, for God himself. So the stakes are very high. If you remember at the end, what does he say about the wicked and slothful servant? He says, cast him out. First of all, he takes everything that he even had away from him and gives it to the other guy. But he says, cast him into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So the stakes are high in terms of us being able to utilize those talents. to create this fruitful life for ourselves, our families, our communities. And when we faithfully invest what we've been given, then the door is open to even greater opportunities. So this parable is not a teaching about, go out and do your work and you're going to make a lot of money. That's not what it's about. It's about impact, right? It's about impact. And when we faithfully invest what we've been given, we have opportunities for even greater impact, even greater impact. And so, work done in obedience ultimately becomes like what we talked about last week. It can become our worship when we act in obedience to what we've been given. So I want to go back to your handout now, and I want to quickly, only because I lost about 10 minutes today in my terrible Zoom mess up there. But I want to kind of look through some of this. So I'm going to assign you this as homework, guys. I'm going to ask you to really take your time and work through some of this. I want you to do a talent inventory, right? I want you to know what are the things that you feel like are your natural talents, meaning, they just come to you naturally, or at least they seem to. We may want to reframe that and say they were given to me. Maybe you're great at communication, or maybe you're great at sales, maybe leadership, maybe problem solving. What is it? Just write those out. What are some of the things that you think you're gifted at doing? Then I want to know, what are the learned skills? What have you learned to do well? You've already applied that talent in some area, right? I have a natural talent for being able to take in a lot of information, roll it around in my noodle, and spit it out into something that other people can consume. Because I know, people aren't going to read the books I read. They're not necessarily going to go to the seminars I go to. They're not going to necessarily study. Like, that's just natural to me. But my learned skill is being able to now put that together in a way that I can give it to other people and they can actually receive it and do something with it. Like, that was me applying that natural love of reading and learning into a learned skill of being able to teach, right? So what does that look like for you? And then what are the resources that you already have at your disposal? What are the things that you do have? Do you have time? Do you have capital? Do you have a platform? Do you have a great reputation? Whatever it is in your business, let's make that talent inventory, right? And ask yourself, what's already been entrusted to you that you're responsible for stewarding, not wishing you had more of? It's already there. So God didn't miscalculate. He did not miscalculate. You have exactly what you need to be faithful today. There's no mistake. Each of these servants were given or entrusted with talents based on their capacity. So it was done precisely in order. So God didn't miscalculate. You have exactly what you need to be faithful today. So I'm really going to challenge you to come up with a list of what are some of those things. Make sense? Okay. Number 2, we're talking about faithful versus fearful leadership. And faithful servants take action, they're willing to risk, they engage, and they multiply their efforts. But fearful servants hide, they're on the defense, they avoid losing. So which ones are you? So here's your homework. Think about this. Where in your business are you burying a talent instead of deploying it? Where are you doing that? And what are you calling being cautious that might actually just be fear? Wouldn't that be important to know where you're being, or you think you're being cautious, or you're still thinking about it, you're still planning it? Like those of you that are high C's on the disc or high S's on the disc, you know that. It's like, I'm still thinking, I'm still working through, I don't want to put it out there until I'm exactly right. But maybe that's not that. Maybe it's actually just fear. And if fear were removed, if you were the good and faithful servant, not perfect, but good and faithful servant, what bold move would you make in the next 90 days? And I want you to come up with an answer for that in your homework. I want you to write it down, because inaction is a decision, and it's one God takes seriously. Inaction is a decision. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Everybody's going to go look that song up on Rush. What's the name of that song? You pop that in the chat. I forgot the name of the song. But it's one that God takes seriously. So we want to make sure that we are working out of a faithful place, not a fearful place. Number three, let's look at ROI, return on investment, through a kingdom, right? A kingdom lens. This is about impact. Do you want to have greater impact? Say yes. Do you want to have greater influence? Okay, limelight. Thank you, Chris. Do you want to serve more people? Do you want to be developed as a leader? Do you want to develop other leaders? Do you want to strengthen your family and other families? Do you want to advance the kingdom? That's the kingdom ROI. It's not, I spent this much, I made this much. It's a totally different way of framing this and looking at it. So I want you to think about these things. If you're a follower, then it's an easy question. If you're not a follower, I'll reframe it for you, okay? So how does my business currently glorify God? If you're not a believer, then maybe you say, does my current business really magnify what I feel like I already have been given to do? How does your business currently glorify God? Who is better because your business exists? Jeff Henderson says it this way: if your business closed tomorrow, who would care? Who would care, right? So who's better because your business exists? And what would multiplication look like beyond income? Right? These servants multiplied. They didn't just add, they multiplied what they had been given. And that's what I think we're really called to, those of us who are willing to step up and lead at a higher level and be accountable to the gifts that we've been given. So yes, the parable involves money, but the principle is broader. It's not just about money. Is it just about money? Gary Keller says it's not about the money. It's about who you become. It's about becoming the kind of person that wants to have greater impact, more influence, wants to serve more people, wants to develop as a leader, wants to strengthen their own family and maybe others, depending on your business. And everyone who works on your team has a family of some level that they're trying to strengthen as well. You know, it's about building a business based on this kingdom impact, right? And having that kingdom lens. So it's the parable involves money, but the principle is way broader. All right, so now let's talk about this. The master gave different amounts on purpose. So the expectation was the same. What was the expectation? Faithfulness. That's why he says good and faithful servant. But the assignments were different. We all have a different assignment. We are not to compare ourselves to other people, even if we think they have the same assignment. It's not going to be helpful. So I want you to think about these things for your homework. Where are you using comparison as an excuse to underperform? I want you to think about that. Well, I can't do that. I mean, it's easy for them to do because they have this particular skill set or something that I don't have, or they have capital that I don't have. They have an experience I don't have. Like that is, you're using comparison in that case as an excuse to underperform. Remember, each servant had been given a specific number of talents. As it says in the good book, each according to his ability. So number two, are you resenting someone else's talents, their 5 talents, instead of maximizing your 2? Is it easy? Most of the people that are going to be on this call, just because of the nature of the work that I do, they're salespeople, they're running a sales business, they're selling something, right? And so it's easy, especially I work with a lot of people that are in the real estate space, and it's so easy because everybody likes to talk about how much each person has done. It creates so much comparison that you can look at someone who has the quote 5 talents and you've got 2, and it's like, well, I mean, of course. So they have more. You know, what do you expect me to do? No, it's about maximizing your own talent. That's why you've all heard it said, you could fill in the blank with me. Comparison is the thief of joy. You know it. Comparison's the thief of joy. Well, now we know why. So what does faithfulness look like at your current capacity? I really encourage you guys for homework to think through this deeply. Because God grades on faithfulness, not scale. God grades on faithfulness. not scale. I believe with all of my heart and soul that there are people out there that have been called to something that maybe to you might look like a lesser job, but they show up and they do that job from the depths of their soul, and they're there to make a difference. I worked at Wendy's in high school. Anybody ever do a fast food gig? I think it's like it should be. I think in addition to serving in the military, everybody should have to work fast food at some point. And I was 16 years old, and I could not believe that they were paying me to come to work and make hamburgers and take people's money and clean the bathrooms. Like, I thought it was the most amazing thing. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I wanted to be a Wendy's manager. That was like, this was my dream job. And I was like, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. I mean, I do it for free. These are all my friends from high school. Like, we're hanging out, we're having a good time. Like, this is unbelievable. Uh, and so I got Employee of the Month twice. They finally gave me Employee of the Year because they were like, she's just not going to quit. She's crushing it. I just thought this was the pinnacle of my life. Why would I ever do anything else? Um, I was trying to be faithful, and I didn't even know it, to what I have been called to do. And I believe today there are some people that this morning I heard the garbage truck roll by. You know, I believe that there are some people who go do that job and they own it. By the way, if you've not thanked your waste management folks lately, imagine if they just stopped working for a month or two, right? You don't want to be in that world where they quit their job. So I believe that it's irrelevant what you're doing. Elon Musk is making rocket ships, and some guy this morning was picking up my garbage. I don't think one is any better than the other. Now, one's a little more valuable to the marketplace, so there's more money involved. But truthfully, I'd rather everybody, no matter what their work is, show up and do it like with all. They're all in, they're sold out, they're totally committed. That's what I'd rather. God grades on faithfulness, not on scale. All right, so let's talk about the day of reckoning. This is being accountable. Who are you accountable to as a leader? You're accountable to your clients, your internal and external clients. You're accountable to your team. Those could be the people that are literally on your team. Those could be people that you work with in the community. If you're a realtor, you work with a lot of roofers and plumbers and mortgage lenders and all of those folks. Those are your teams as well. Are you leading in your family? You know, do you have influence, and are you using that influence? What are the opportunities that you're creating in the way that you show up in your life every day? So if you were asked today to give an account of how you've stewarded your own business, your own gifts, your own talents, what would you be proud to present? And what would you just kind of want to put that? Let's don't look at that part of my life. So I want you to really think about that because, you know, I think today's the day of reckoning. Can we all do better? Is anybody on here nailed this whole thing? No, there will never be a hand that goes up on that one. If you think you've nailed this one, we probably should have a conversation. You're missing something. But here's the truth. Leadership always answers to someone higher. It always answers to someone higher. By the way, it's happy to do so. Right? Iron sharpens iron. Some of you have heard that saying. We want to get ourselves into rooms where people are willing to speak truth into us so that we can become better versions of ourselves. If God's gift to us is our potential and our gift to God is realizing that potential, who's helping you step into a higher version of you? Who's pushing you to move into your potential? Who's asking you to be accountable to the talents you've been given? And are you willing to go out and trade? Are you willing to go out and work? Are you willing to go out and invest those talents for the betterment of not only yourself and your family, your team and your community, but God's kingdom, you know, God himself. All right. So number 6, multiplication requires movement. So I want you, as part of your homework, and I know you're thinking about all these things as I'm talking to you today. What is one talent you've been underusing? Just one. We all have something we're not using to the fullness that we could be using it. And then one action step to invest it in the next 30 days. Just one thing you can do. See, the truth is talents don't multiply in storage, they multiply in circulation. Remember, the third servant buried his talent in the ground because he believed that his master was hard and unfair, and that he was a punishing master, which doesn't even make sense. He had been given 20 years of wages, like ding, ding, ding. So he stored his talent away. It didn't multiply. And in fact, he lost it all. But we got to get that stuff into circulation. So I want you to think about what's one talent you've been underusing and one thing you can do to put it into play in the next 30 days. All right, and we'll wrap it up here. Joy as the reward, not just results, right? Because that's the truth. At the end, the master said to those first two servants, enter into the joy of your master, which doesn't make sense. Think about the listener 2,000 years ago who's like, wait a minute, I'm a bond servant. Like, I'm in debt to this person. They're not inviting me into a party. I'm their servant. This doesn't make sense. So you gotta go back, take your ears 2,000 years back to an entirely different culture and understand these people would have heard this as, what you talking about, Willis? So what he was saying is that when you're faithful when you're faithful, that the reward is there. So how might joy, peace, and fulfillment actually be tied to faithful stewardship? Can you have more joy, more peace, and more fulfillment by utilizing the gifts you've been given? I believe the answer is yes. And in fact, in order to determine that, I'm asking you, where have you experienced joy when you were fully using your gifts? Where have you already experienced joy? Just by using those gifts. And what joy might be on the other side of obedience that you've been delaying? We're talking about faithful obedience. My guess is if you spend a little time with any or all of these questions, you're going to realize that you're not using your talents. You're not investing them maybe as wisely as you could be. You're probably doing something right. You probably wouldn't even be here. But there's always more. So God's reward isn't just more responsibility. It's deeper joy. Deeper joy. That's the whole point. So the question I want to end with, and we have a few minutes here. Hallelujah. Look how God works. It's amazing. Start 10 minutes late, finish 10 minutes early. But I want you to think about this. What would it look like to fully invest everything God has entrusted to you without fear, without comparison, without holding back? What would change in your life if you decided to understand that I'm going to read my notes here because I really love the way I came up with this. Stewardship is tailored to capacity. We are designed with precision and then entrusted with matching responsibility. That ain't no chat GPT. Those are my thoughts and my words. Stewardship is tailored to capacity. So if we're designed with precision and then entrusted with responsibility that matches that, what are we waiting for? What are we waiting for? So in the last few minutes, it's not Limelight, Chris said. It's free will. Okay, everybody make that check on Spotify or Amazon Music. But I'd love to open it up for just a few minutes here to hear some of your thoughts on this. Maybe you recognize that you're not fully utilizing your gifts and talents. Maybe you're not even sure what they are. Like, what are your thoughts on this? I'm going to open it up. You guys would be able to unmute yourself if anybody has anything, or you can raise your little virtual hand. But give me something here. Nothing? Is everybody using their talents fully? Okay, Danielle, give it to me, girl.
I don't have a specific answer fleshed out, but I know there's one in there. I'm in a season right now where I have some clarity of some of my talents, and I'm. This is a great question, or a great exercise. Like all this in here, I can't wait to do this week. Is find where the limiting beliefs are in that, where it's like excuses to underperform, or I'm just in this really great season of not so much what's next, because that's a little bit too big of a chunk there, but making it very clearly back to my talents, back to my God-given talents, and what I love about what I experience when I'm in those talents as in praise of God. I'm excited to answer these questions. I don't really have an answer other than I have an idea of them. I'm just super excited about the timing of this entire workshop, this worksheet.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to hear you say that. Truthfully though, you're tapping into something there. We all know what it feels like. This is I can never pronounce his last name, but Mikhaili
Yeah,
Csikszentmihalyi, blah, blah, blah,
check
the
me off,
flow
or I
guy,
read
right?
something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, the flow guy. And he has done extensive research on this. And you know when you're in flow and like time just passes. You realize you didn't eat, you didn't have anything to drink, you didn't even go to the bathroom, but like you're just so in the zone that like everything is just flowing out of you. Is what he calls it, flow, right? And so all of us knows, I mean, we can't spend all of our time there, but the more time we can get into that space on a regular, consistent basis, that's why it feels like flow, because it's flowing out of us, right? It's been poured into us and now it's flowing out of us. And I think understanding that, you know, taking a risk, taking action. What we're being promised is that when we're doing it from a place of our naturally gifted talents, that joy is on the other side of it. Joy, we know that. So why would
Hmm.
we hold back? That's a promise to us. Enter into the joy, the happiness of your master. And so, like to me, that's just such a great promise right from the word of God Himself that says, I've given you these talents, these gifts. I'm not asking you to do better than anybody else. I'm not asking you to be like anybody else. I'm asking you to find out what feels not, that's a tough one, right? Like we don't want to just go by our feelings, but tap into it. Ask the questions. That's why I asked the questions this week that will get you thinking on what those things are. Because when you act, when you take action from that place, what's on the other side is joy. Has anybody ever done something really hard, but you felt amazing doing it? I climbed Mount LeConte in Tennessee back in September. It was hard. It was so hard. Like I was crying. I'm never gonna get there. It was really hard. On the way down, it was faster, but it was harder. My toenails felt like they were all falling off because you're just down, down, down 7 miles. It was so hard. I felt elated. Elated. It was hard. It was one of the hardest physical things I've ever done. I was thrilled. And I'm gonna do it again. I'm going to take a different route. So we all know that there's things that we do that are super hard. Like, did anybody see that guy climb that building in Taiwan the other day with nothing? Did y'all see that? Alex Honnold. I don't have Netflix, but I was able to watch some of the highlights on YouTube. That's bonkers, man. That dude is a free climber. If you don't know anything about that, go look it up. It's bonkers. Like, I don't, there's no way I would do it, but that's not my gift, free climbing. But it's his and he lives it with joy. And he could die every minute of every day that he's out there doing that stuff. So we all know that there's things that we do that are really hard, but that bring us an incredible amount of joy. But this is a biblical promise.
Hmm.
Invest the talents you've been given. God says, enter into the joy of your master. So I think it's worth doing the work. And I'm glad it's come at a good time for you for sure, Danielle, but maybe for a lot of people and for all of us. It's like it's worth to take a step back and think, am I investing what I've been given in the best way possible? Not like anybody else. Comparison is a thief of joy, but like the way I feel like I'm doing, I need to be doing it. And all of us know there's more. There's always more.
Yeah,
At least
one of
for,
the Oh,
yes, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Sorry. I was just going to say that the biggest thing I'm noticing as you were saying is like things are hard work, and so one of the commitments I'm realizing that I'm going to make as I do this exercise is I'm not going to get into the how. It's really about the why and the what has been given to me, and utilizing that, not going into, well, I really enjoy and then I would need to do. I know better than that. I cannot get to, there is no to do. It's just stay in the gifts, the flow, and not any how, there's zero hows.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's one of the great things you taught me and worked with me on as my coach. Like, don't get caught up in the tyranny of the how, right? It's kind of a nature for some of us who want to figure out, well, how am I going to do that? But obviously,
It's the
as
wrong
soon as you ask, how
question.
am I going to do that? Your brain's going to go, well, you can. Like, you don't,
Right.
it's
Right.
going to because it wants homeostasis. It wants everything to stay the same. It doesn't want you to take a risk and put yourself out there. So the
Yeah.
minute you ask how, yeah, you're going to find yourself in trouble because your brain's going to be like, I don't know, what were you thinking? That's stupid. Go hide that thing in the ground. Yeah.
Exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I fixed the Zoom. Sorry, I don't know how I put 10 a.m. in there. So I'm assuming that's why some people are not on today. Hopefully, if you're on, you figured it out or you just went to the right time. Anyway, I will correct that and send out some communication so that everybody will have the correct time and link. But I hope this has been helpful. I'm super excited. On our next and I think I said to you guys, if you have any recommendations, I don't think I'm going to go in order. Like, I'm not just going to work through the Bible. I'm going to pray about it and see what jumps out, or if you guys have a particular leader. But on our next session, we're going to dive into a leader that you've probably heard of. And we may look at a different part of his leadership. We're going to be talking about one of our men from the Old Testament, and maybe look at his leadership differently than you have in the past, or you probably will already know his story, but maybe we're going to look at a different piece of it that you hadn't thought of before. So if you have any suggestions of people that you'd like to learn more about, or you think are great warnings or examples of leadership, let me know. And I will see you guys in a couple of weeks at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much, everybody. Have a great week.